This was Miami Vice before Miami Vice was cool.
Yeah, and we arrested him and all that. And when I was transferred and hired by DEA to go to France because of they needed a French-speaking agent, fluent French-speaking agent, not State Department French. And that's how they had put out a notice that they find us a fluent French-speaking agent who has narcotics experience to go work on the French Connection. And because Nixon...
What year was this?
This was in 1973.
So the French Connection you're talking about there, how in time is that the same? Because the movie with Gene Hackman and Popeye Doyle was made before that, though, right?
Right. No, the movie came out, believe it or not, the movie came out in 73. I was hired in 1972. And what happened is I was going to school and taking night courses for my associate police degree. And I got pulled out of class, and they said, we got a call from Mr. Ben Tyson, the director of the, in those days, it had converted over, not yet, it hadn't converted over to BNDD. It was still FBN. And Ben, we call him the Batman. He was the director of the Miami office. And quite a guy. He looked like a mobster. And it says, he wants you in Miami immediately. So I said, oh, this has got to be important. So I blue lighted my car. I had a blue light, put it on the dash, and off I go to Miami. And it's about almost 9 o'clock at nighttime. And the secretary was downstairs. The office was closed, but she was by the door waiting. And she opened the door and she says, Ben's waiting for you upstairs. And I go upstairs. And the Batman, his nickname was the Batman. Batman says, Frenchie, sit down and keep your mouth shut. And he goes, get me Washington on the line now. And they had put out a vacancy announcement, a position announcement, for a French fluent. We need to hire a French fluent speaking agent with narcotic experience to go to France and work on the French Connection undercover. And the Batman called Washington, says, I got the guy for you. Don't look any further. And
See, I'm detecting a habit here. You've never applied for a job. You've just been ordered from one job to another.
Exactly. So
welcome to married life too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So as a result, I'm sitting there, and next thing you know, he says, all right. He says, in those days, they hired a federal agent as grade 5. All right. And he said, he has 7 years of major undercover work for us and also for the sheriff's department. And this guy's got a reputation that's unbelievable, and he's your man. But he will not accept a grade 5 because of his experience, grade 9 only.
You see, dude, you've already got an agent now, too.
All you need now is a publicist.
He was my agent.
Does he get 10% of everything you make?
Yeah. No, that was as many drinks as he could take down.
Oh, yeah.
Which ended up being 20% of your income.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they called him back within 5 minutes, and they said, swear him in. And it was like 3 months later, I was, well, of course, I went through the academy immediately. And 3 months later, I was in France.
As a brand new DE agent.
Yeah, and that was unheard of, because if you took a foreign assignment, you had to, Steve, you know this, you have to have at least more than 5 years on the job, etc. And what happened is you had to go before a board in Washington to be interviewed. Now, I was ordered to go to the board, and Ben told me, he says, okay, we put you in for that position. You have to go before a board in D.C. Keep your mouth shut and just show up and answer their question. And these were the top dogs of the administration and the deputy administrator sitting as the board director. And I'm sitting there, and there's two guys from New York, and Ron Provencher and Kevin Finity. And these guys had more than 5 years on the job. And they looked at me and they said, hi, I'm Kevin and I'm Ron. And I said, hey, how you doing? They said, you're here for that position in Paris interview? I said, yeah. I said, I was told to come in, and my boss in Miami said, put in. How long have you been with us? I said, about 6 months. They said, what? You shouldn't even be here. And I said, I follow orders, guys. What can I tell you?
Hell, I arrested a lieutenant on my first night at work and a colonel. Don't let me go high and arrest a general now. Now get out of my way.
Right. So as a result, I went into the board, and they started asking me a question. And the head of the intelligence bureau, an Italian gentleman, says to me, and he was a hotshot, he says, quote unquote, who in the hell do you think you are? Come in here before us. You've only been on the job for 3 months. He said, how dare you come up here? You don't even qualify. And I said, sir, I'm here because my boss told me to put in for the job. I follow orders, and I don't mean to insult anybody here, but I came here and, I'm here because you have to interview me. And I was told, to appear. And the director of the board was the deputy administrator of BNDD. Now it had switched over to BNDD. And he said, Mr. Charette, would you please step outside for a minute? And I stepped outside, and I could hear the yelling, who in that? His name was Andy Targalino. And he says, who in the hell do you think you are talking to this gentleman like that? He was following orders, and you keep your GD mouth shut. You hear me? And that's an order. And I could hear the screaming. Next thing you know, the deputy administrator says, Mr. Charette, come back in. And he says, Mr. Targalino wants to say something to you. And he apologized to me in front of the whole board. I was wrong. I should have never said anything to you like that. And I apologize, but this is the first time this has ever happened. And but you are fluent in French and all that, and everybody's vouching that you are the man for this job, and you got the experience. And Mr. Charette, I owe you an apology. And I said, you don't have to apologize with me. I said, I can understand how procedures are. And I said, I respect you and I respect the board. Next thing you know, I'm in Paris.
Hey, real quick, did you think the apology was sincere, or do you think it was because he was ordered to do it? Do you think he really had a change of heart?
He was ordered to do it.
Okay. Okay.
I was going to say, did you ever get apologized to anymore in your DEA career?
Yeah. But next thing you know, here I come into Paris, and
let's hold there for a second, because I want to kind of set the stage for this too, because you've written 2 books.
Yes, sir.
And these books kind of are, we're not going to talk about every case today, but I think what we'll do is, you've got the one, The French Connection, because it evokes such strong memories. It's romantic on one end, it's action-packed on the other. People think, about The French Connection 2. And while this wasn't the same thing, but you've got 2 books. One's called One Hell of a Ride, The Investigative Undercover Life of a DEA Agent. Then you've got One Hell of a Ride 2, From the French Connection to Operation Southern Comfort. So French Connection came first, right?
Right.
So let's talk about this too. Kind of set the stage for us. They needed you, but what was the organization? What was being shipped? What was it that now FBN, now BNDD, was trying to stop? Obviously it's heroin, right? So who was behind it? What were they doing? Give us a little bit of lay of the land.
Okay, what happened is President Nixon declared officially a war on heroin, and said,
was this before or after he brought Elvis to the White House and made him an honorary DEA agent?
During that same time frame. So what happened is when he declared that. There was a lot of corruption in France, and the reason why there was so much heroin, French heroin was the most popular heroin and the most pure heroin there was anywhere in the world. made from their labs out of Marseille. And normally, if get Asian heroin and all that, usually the purity was in around 60 to 70%. And the French, the most famous chemist for the French Corsican mob was Joseph Cesari. And he was the only one that put out from his lab to the Corsican mob to ship to the U.S. mob, shipments of cocaine, 92% pure heroin.
Man, that could lead to a lot of overdoses when people think they're getting the street crap right, and now they're getting something that's one-third stronger.
Yeah, well, normally the street heroin
was cut so much, right?
Was cut. You got they purchased the mobster, and myself as a Canadian mobster, we would negotiate, and it was around $18,000 a kilo. Okay, in France, and that kilo was, let's say, 96 or 92% pure. You can take that and you cut it 10 times to reduce the purity and the strength of it. And then by the time it gets to New York, they cut it again 10 times to lower it to a street level of around 6 to 5%. That's what a junkie would be putting in his vein. If you put 92% heroin, you're dead on the spot, right on there. You're foaming at the mouth. I've seen it happen, and so they were the main supplier for heroin for the United States.
And at that time, rather than cartels, it was organized crime. It was the mob. Which mob was it coming to in the United States?
The mob was out in New York, the Colombo.
We should have asked Michael Franzese. We just had Michael Franzese quite a few episodes back. Michael was the only capo regime to walk away from the Colombo crime family and still live. So he was doing stuff with taxes. But that's why it was interesting, because I don't think people realized it. But that's interesting too, because I thought for a while there was a philosophical debate inside the mobs, because we had Dominic Polifrone on here. He's the guy who went after Richard Kuklinski. They were looking at dope dealing. There was kind of a philosophical thing. I thought for a long time the mob didn't want to deal with drugs. I mean, it was more, hey, they'll do prostitution, racketeering, extortion, but drugs were kind of off limits. Why did that change?
Well, there was a debate amongst the organized crime mob in New York and the heads of the various functions of the mob, and they didn't want to deal with the old timers, the real, mafioso from Italy. That was a no-no. But eventually, they saw that there was a hell of a profit to be made. And so they started getting involved, and finally it was accepted. And so now they had to get the source, and so they made connections through, and that's how the French Connection movie came on. When it came out in 73, Gene Hackman. I was in Paris when it came out. I went to the official showing of the movie.
And did it almost blow your entire investigation now that they got Popeye Doyle on the case? And
yeah, Popeye was quite a character. And
I still remember the one line out of that movie. He's looking at one of the suspects. Did you pick your toes in Poughkeepsie? Did you pick your toes?
Yeah, the prison. But, a lot of people have a misconception of the French Connection, how the name came about. It was because of the movie, and the movie made it an even more famous organization. That case was just one case, okay? And it was made in New York, and the story, if you watch the movie, great movie. Gene Hackman played a crazy, beautiful, and his partner. But it was a single case, and that was the end of the so-called French Connection.
And the dope in that one, the heroin was hidden in the floor, or and underneath the floorboard of one of the vehicles they were entering. They had to take the side.
Citroën, yes.
Citroën, yeah. The famous French vehicles that actually De Gaulle rode around in. They tried to kill him in, yes.
Well, Pete, that movie with Gene Hackman, then, is that based on real events, or is that just Hollywood make-believe?
No, it was a real case and all that. And unfortunately, what happened is after the arrest took down, if you remember the scene, the last scene of that movie, very vividly, if you remember Gene Hackman, the famous race underneath the car chase and all that, and then he was trying to apprehend the Frenchman that was there with this shipment. Very dapper looking gentleman and all that. And then when he got on the subway, Gene Hackman, the doors closed, if you remember that scene. And next thing you know, the Frenchman just gave him a wave, bye-bye, and he disappeared. This gentleman's name was Jean Géant, Gehan. It's in my book. And his picture is in there. And I still carry, till this day, in my wallet, I still have his picture, arrest picture. And he was hunted down for years. And I don't want to distract, but he was the head of the Corsican mob and head of the heroin operation for France. And he disappeared. Everybody was looking for him worldwide. And so that case just was there. When I went to France, my orders were, you will work undercover posing as a Canadian mobster. You have informants, and the corruption that was occurring in France in those days, that the Narcotics Bureau was not doing their jobs properly because they were all corrupted. They were being paid by the Corsican mob, tipping them off on what the Americans were doing. Now, what happened, to give you just a quick historical thing, Jack Cusack, who was the director in France for Europe, decided that enough is enough. On his own, without consent from Washington, he held a press conference. God bless him. Jack was a good friend of mine. And he publicly went on national TV in France and all over Europe and accused the French government of corruption, the Narcotics Bureau, and said the reason why we have heroin in the United States and the addiction problem and why we're declaring a war on drugs is because you have corrupt cops and we can't get cooperation and they won't act on our information. Well, within 24 hours, he was kicked out of the country. As a result, the French president reorganized and dismantled the Narcotics Bureau, took the head of the robbery squad, a guy by the name of Lemuel, Mr. Lemuel. He was like a father to me. And I admired him, and God rest, he retired and got ran over by a truck 6 months after he had retired, and he was one of the best. And his theory was, and his boys on his anti-gang squad, if they encountered a robbery going on, there was some shootouts that occurred, people were killed, innocent bystanders. His response was, they shouldn't have been there to begin with.
Wow. It's pretty cold-hearted.
He was a tough guy. And his guys were honest, with the exception of one of them. And that was one of the biggest cases that I made with my guys and all that. And I was going to transport 20 kilos of heroin through Montreal, and it was going to be delivered to, and I'll tell you the story, Herbert Sperling. Have you ever heard Morgan Herbert Sperling? He was the head mobster in New York for the Colombo organization. He was like the heroin king of the mob. People, if you Google Herbert Sperling, you'll see his history. The guy was the main person involved in the dispersion of heroin in New York and for the mob all over the United States. And he had been indicted, went to jail, never indicted for the heroin and all that, but went to jail and, was accused of all kinds of stuff, but in and out and all that. But long story short is, while I was working undercover, posing as a cane mobsters and ordering shipments and then escaping and fleeing, I made a case. It was called the Salvatore Lamanna case, 20 kilos of heroin.
And hang on, right? Let me ask you a quick question. I know that you speak fluent French, but do you have an accent though that makes you sound like Canadian? That's what I was going to say.
Oh yeah.
So how do you explain that? Is it because as a French speaker, you're actually out of Quebec, right? So
Quebec.
Montreal,
Quebecois.
Quebecois. See, a lot of people say Quebec, and it's like no, it's Quebec.
Quebec.
Yeah.
Right.
So Quebecois. So you are, but that's what I'm saying. If that allows you to operate in Paris and not trying to pose as a Frenchman, but you are a French Canadian.
Right. Monster. And I spoke French Canadian intentionally because, just a quick comparison. Let's say a Frenchman, if he says, you have a nice car, a Frenchman, Parisian French, will say, vous avez un très belle voiture. Okay. Now, a Canadian will say, un beau char.
Wow. Big difference.
Yeah,
big difference. So, using my Quebecois in France and talking with these people, I would use the Quebecois language and they would laugh at me,
What, did they look down on you because your French wasn't as sophisticated as their French?
No, because it was very convincing and they didn't think, well, this guy can't be, a cop, a French narcotics agent. So I had some good backing. And so I made a lot of cases. My first case that ever happened is the French police could not work undercover whatsoever.
By law or because they just weren't good at it?
By law. The Napoleon Code of Law says that it's an entrapment factor if you're undercover. You're entrapping the person into committing a crime.
And when you talk about the French police, I mean, because the French basically have a national police force. So you're talking, was it known also as a Sûreté? Or was that
yes.
Because there was DGSC and DGSI, but that's kind of like their intelligence stuff, right?
Right, exactly. Sûreté. And what happened is this. Because they couldn't work undercover, they asked the assistants of our bureau, can you get a French-speaking undercover guy, and he can pose and escape every time if we get a shipment in and all that. So what happened is I would operate, and my first case they said, look, Pierre, we have a guy that is dealing with some guys that have raw opium out of the Moulin Rouge district, and they want to sell 15 kilos of raw opium. And he'll arrange for you to meet with them. And so I said, okay. One of the first thing working undercover, and Steve, and Morgan, you probably know this also.
No, I sucked at undercover. I looked too much like a cop all the time. I was a banker one time. That was my role. That was it.
Well, you learn undercover work is very exciting, very dangerous. Steve, you know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Steve got a sunburn going down to Turks and Caicos, didn't you, Steve?
Oh yeah.
Well, I've been there too.
Yep.
But what happened is, I would have to escape. So I met this guy, and on the Champs-Élysées, first of all, one rule in undercover work: you are the boss and call the shots. Your supervisor doesn't call the shot. He's there to help you. Some supervisor, unfortunately, never followed that rule. And I lost one of my best friends, and he was one of my class counselor. And Frankie got killed in New York meeting a mobster, shot him in the head. And because his supervisor told him, you're going to meet this guy, blah, 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 he's with the mob. And Frankie said, I don't like it. I don't like the sound of it. And I'm not doing it. And he says, I'm ordering you to do it. He lost his life that night.
What's Frankie's last name?
Huh?
What was Frankie's last name?
Frankie Tamillo.
Frank Tamillo. So let's dedicate this episode
Absolutely.
to Frank Tamillo's memory.
Was this part of your operation? Was this part of your case, or was this independent of the case you were working on?
No, this is while Frankie was a counselor in my class when I went through agent school. And Frankie was a young, good-looking young man, just as he was a good friend, and he lost his life, and a lot of us cried, and when we heard that he got killed, and so it became a thing for people working undercover. I worked undercover for almost 23 years, and we learned a lesson from that. And the undercover agent calls the shot. So I told the French, I'll meet this guy on the Champs-Élysées where there's a lot of people and all that. And then I did I always do my homework. I always check out the area where I'm going to have to meet, find the quickest escape route once an arrest is ordered to be taken down. And the guy arrived, showed me, I had a car pull up in front of the cafe and near the Claridge Hotel. I'll never forget my first case there. And my escape route was to, as soon as the cops came in and seized the car and arrested everybody, I took off running, ran through the hotel, I ran out through the back street and took off running. Well, everything went as planned, and I took off running, and they seized the opium, arrested the guys. And next thing you know, I'm running through the hotel, and as I'm hitting the street, I take an immediate right. It's a very small street. And I hear this voice yelling, "Arrêtez, arrêtez, police, police." And there was a cop, uniform cop, chasing me. And he's got a gun.
Oh.
Right? And now I put it into high gear. I was 33 years of age, and I was saying, oh, you better put it on a little bit faster.
Catch me if you can.
And sure as hell, he shot, tried to hit me. Thank God the bullet hit the building.
Oh, my gosh.
And I went into high gear. I think I broke a running record and went through various streets and all that. And there was a bar that was not too far from our office that I used to go to. And I ran into this bar, and the owner of the bar, he goes, "Hello, Pierre." And I go, "The basement, open it up now." And I went into the basement, and he shut the trap door right behind the counter. And you could hear sirens all over the place and all that. And I stayed there for almost 3 hours. And finally, everything calmed down. Then I walked back to the undercover French office. And there was my director, deputy director, Nick Pinella, great guy, God bless him. And the French director who was there, and a representative from the embassy was there. And I walked in and I said to Mr. Lemuel, I said, "What in the hell is going on? I almost got killed. A guy shot at me." "Oh, Monsieur Charette, we're very sorry," and all that. We never tell these police officers that you're the undercover person. I said, "We're going to change the plays here from here on because I'm not going to get killed over this thing." So that was my first experience. But the French Connection, I worked on it for 5 years. and got deliveries of heroin, made the first hashish oil case ever made in Europe.
Well, let's hold there for a second. I want to roll back a little bit and ask you. You're over there for 5 years. Are you married at the time? Do you have family? Are you just still a single guy cruising the streets of Paris looking for an open cafe to talk to the Parisian women? But what are you doing?
No, I was married, and I had my daughter was born in Paris, and my wife, she used to be a narcotics agent. We brought her in Fort Lauderdale when I was a detective because we didn't have a female, and she was a fingerprint expert, and so she became an undercover agent, and we hooked up together and got married, and that's when I got transferred to France.
Now, what did she think about after you told her about getting shot at by the cops? How excited was she to remain in Paris or have you do this work?
Believe it or not, I never brought my work home to tell my wife what went on.
Wait a minute. You didn't tell your wife you got shot at by the French cops?
No. Now she learned about it now.
You mean she didn't learn about it through the podcast now? She knew about it before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the book,
she eventually heard about it, but she knew that, we don't talk about it. I don't want to know. And then whenever I was outside of the Paris region, I worked in Belgium, I worked in Amsterdam, I worked in Germany undercover. I made cases all over these countries and all that, and great cops, great agents that were supporting me, DEA agent. There was only 7 of us in Paris, and it was a team effort. It was just not Pete Charette. I did this. I had the best agent colleagues working together. We did it, and we caused hell all over Europe. And then I went undercover.
Well, hold on before you get past Belgium, because I'm a huge Belgian beer snob.
Yeah. Great.
Well, did you go? So there's a cafe there called the Delirium Tremens Cafe in Brussels. It's the original cafe for Delirium Tremens. It's not too far from the city center. You'll see it down there. I don't know if you ever went there or not, but it's like I was a huge fan of going. One of my goals in life is to go visit some of the Trappist monasteries around there and go to the source.
The Grand Place.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, so much good stuff. But I have to ask you. Oh, yeah. I have to ask you, though, there was one very famous cop you never mentioned working with, and he was world-renowned. Inspector Jacques Clouseau of the Sûreté.
They sent him to the Kansas Highway Patrol.
Yeah, hard. Well, he tried to get on. I heard that he couldn't make it on KHP and went to DEA instead. Mr. Hogan.
It's funny that you just, Morgan, that you just brought that up.
Because it's the French Connection. That was the movie back in '68, Robert Duvier. Let's kill Clouseau.
My favorite character, Clouseau, Inspector Clouseau. Now that you brought that up, yes, we did have Clouseau. Clouseau was a supervisor in the French Narcotics Bureau, and we used to call him Clouseau because great guy, funny as can be, but he would shuffle and walk around on his tiptoes, and I am the Inspector Clouseau, and all that, and we would crack up, and everybody called him Clouseau. So we did have a real Clouseau working. But what happened is I worked all over Europe, and I made cases, with the Belgian police, the Amsterdam Sûreté, did a lot of undercover work. And one of the things that we did is that I also used to take shipments. I took a shipment delivery of 12,000 kilos of hashish in Amsterdam at the docks. And but one of the things that we also work very close with the military. and I was the liaison guy from our office to coordinate. They had an undercover guy that was working in Amsterdam because the military used to go there, and Amsterdam's got the blue light district and all that,
and the red light district, and that
yeah.
Hey, when you say the military, you're talking about the U.S. military or the military? Okay, U.S. military.
U.S. military guys from Germany, from all the various things, and they'd go there, and then they'd get involved with buying drugs and all that. And so this guy would gather intelligence, and also he would order drugs to compare to see what the purity was, and he would give it to us and all that. Long story short on that is that he called me one day and he goes, "Frenchie, I got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He says, got an owner of a nightclub strip joint, and he says he's putting out the word that I'm a possible undercover agent for the government, U.S. government. And he says he's trying to ruin my reputation here, because he was working undercover. He says he's going to get me killed. I said, no problem. I said, I'll talk to the boss. So I told the boss, I said, listen, we got a problem. The CID guy, an owner of a club, is bad-mouthing him and accusing and telling people don't do anything with this guy. I think he's a cop.
Was this like in Belgium or Netherlands, or where was it at?
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, okay.
So as a result, the boss said, well, what do you want to do, Frog? I said, I'll tell you what I want to do. I says, with me, Kevin, who was my bodyguard undercover, Irish guy. He looked like a football player. And I always had him there as my bodyguard. And,
in case he needed to knock somebody out, punch.
Yeah.
In case you run into a colonel again, right?
Yeah, and he did it on that night. Long story on that one is that I said, we're coming in, and I said, we had one guy in the office that he was kind of an elder gentleman, but spoke broke from customs and then merged over with us. And he spoke French, and great guy. And so I said, you're going to pose as the Godfather. And I said, and I'm going to pose as the Godfather, Canadian Godfather. And I said, you're going to take us to the club, and we're going to pay him a visit. And I said to Kevin, you're coming in, and Vern Steven also was there. And I said, you guys, we're going to convince this guy that we're the real thing. And the boss said, you know what? He says, where the hell do you come up with all these ideas? I says, hey, I'm used to it. We're going to pay him a visit. And sure enough, the Godfather, American Godfather, he had a black suit on, a white shirt, black tie, and he had sunglasses, and he looked like
He looked like Peter Sellers in the movie Revenge of the Godfather. He's got that big pinstripe suit on and the hat,
Yeah. And as a result, we went to the club, and the club, we showed up, and there was a bouncer at the door. And I turned to Kevin and I said, he's going to try to block the door, you watch. And so we walked up, and we had the CID guy with us. And he puts his arm across the door and he said, we're closed. And I said to him, I said, let me tell you something. This man here is a member of our family. We're from the States. We want to see your boss, and we're going in. He said, no, you're not. And Kevin, pow, dropped him to the ground. And we walked in. There he is, sitting at a table with working on some books, keeping stuff, with a couple of girls there. And he looks up, and we walked in. And Godfather introduces himself, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm from Canada. This man represents my organization in Canada. And Vince says, and I'm from the United States. And he says, we understand that you have a problem with our representative here. He says, now, we're going to tell you right now, we are a family. I think you know what we're talking about. And if you continue bad-mouthing this gentleman, this nightclub is going to be blown up, you will be killed. And as a matter of fact, here's a picture of your wife. Here's a picture of your kids going to school. Here's a picture of your mother, and they will be killed. And his face dropped. I'm so sorry and all that.
Dude, you were rolling heavy on this one, man.
Sounds like Pablo Escobar of Canada.
Oh, yeah. And so he started almost crying, and he apologized, ordered drinks, and we had drinks, and said, now, you're going to do something. We're going to go to every club here tonight in a car, and you're going to introduce us to these club owners. And you're going to apologize to them saying, I was wrong about our friend here, and these are his family from the state. And they all understood. We had free drinks all night long. By the time we got done, we had to spend about 5 hours. And we left, and there was no more problems. So there's certain things that we were doing to help out the Army and all that. So it was a team effort. But working undercover is totally different. And Steve, you know what I'm talking about. And it was my passion. And there was one thing that I tell, and I tell it whenever I teach at academies, and if I'm asked to be a guest speaker, there's one thing that was told to me by my father, and he told me, he says, Pete, you're going into an area that I'm very familiar, and I see a lot of corrupt cops, because he was a motel owner and all that. And he said, promise me one thing. And I said, what's that, Dad? Maintain your integrity. Never sell yourself out. And you know what? I never took a penny. I was offered many bribes, and I'm proud of it. And I said, the greatest thing that an undercover agent and a DEA agent, as Steve will know, is if you maintain your integrity, you got no problem, and you can walk proudly.
There you go. And on just a little side note, I was speaking to some students from New England College up in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago. They were doing their annual trip to DC for tours and so forth. Got them a tour of the DEA Academy. And in the Q&A at the end, that's what we talked about, maintaining your integrity. Because it's like, and I told these kids, they thought it was hilarious when I said this, maintaining your integrity. You give up your integrity, it's like being a virgin. You don't get it back.
Yep.
But you know what? And they all laugh, but they all got the message.
Yeah. But when I made cases. I worked undercover. I had an informant come in Paris, and this case is very significant. One of the biggest cases I ever made, other than Southern Comfort, with my guys. But what happened is I had an informant come into the office, and he said, I have a friend who lives in Montmartre, near the square there in Montmartre, by the famous cathedral, Artist Square. And he said that he can, his colleagues in Belgrade, Bloc country, are starting to fabricate heroin. They started a lab, and they want to compete with take over the French side of the house. And I told Nick, my boss, I said, okay. He says, this guy wants to meet and all that. And Nick goes, for crying out loud, Frenchie, he says, we have heard this rumor that possibly, in Yugoslavia, they grow opium for pharmaceutical reason. And he said, everybody says, they may be producing and da-da-da-da. He says, Frenchie, it's a bunch of bull. We've heard this for several years. I said, Nick, I'm going to meet the guy. He's an old man. I'm going to meet. So I met him. And he said, yes, blah, blah, blah. We discussed, and I told him what it is. He said, but I need money to go and meet with my friends there in Belgrade. And he says, I'll have to travel and then come back. And he says, I need $5,000. I says, okay, no problem. I said, but on one condition. You're going to take the train, and every time the train stops, you will send me a telegram that you're at such and such location in Germany, crossing Belgium, and etc. So I could track him.
And
He says,
so,
okay.
and Murph, when's the last time we heard anybody say use Telegram as a form of communication on any of our
Yeah,
episodes?
I'm not sure we ever have heard that on Game of Crowns.
So I went back to the office, and Nick, I'll never forget Nick says, Frenchie, this guy just wants money to get back to Belgrade, and you'll never show up again. No, I said, Nick, I need $5,000. He said, nope. I said, Nick, I'm going to tell you something right now. Here it is. Gut feeling. I know what I'm doing. You know that. He goes, yes, I know that. He says, all right. I said, if he doesn't come back, I will reimburse you the $5,000. I know that this is real. I got it. I feel it. And as you well know, body language tells you a whole lot if you're a good undercover agent. And I say this to undercover guys, body language, you got to watch for various signs, facial expression, etc. And he'll tell you, you can tell if he's lying or not.
Keeps you alive, doesn't it?
I took a body language course, and trust me, it works. So as a result, he went, sent telegram, came back, called up, and Nick kept saying, you better have $5,000 waiting for me. So he came back 8 days later to Paris, and the informant says he's back, meet at the cafe where you met him. And I walked there in with one of my agents, a friend, and we're sitting at a cafe, and all the Frenchmen are having their little cafe and with a little Calvados, in the morning, which I became a Calvados nut.
What is Calvados?
Calvados is apple cognac. And it's out of Normandy, and it's very famous. All the Frenchmen, when they go in the cafe in the morning, they'll have Café Calva. And what they do is a small coffee and a shot of Calvados. And one of the French cops, one day we were at this little cafe, and I said to Robert, what are they doing? I said, they're drinking this thing, Café Calva. He says, Pierre, I'm from Normandy. He says, Calvados. You never had Calvados? I said, no. He says, he says, it'll warm you up and set you for the day. So I told the waiter, bring me a Café Calva. So he gave it to me. And he says, you take a sip of coffee, and then the Calvados with it, and then just let it slide down. Well, guys, if you can ask for Calvados, they sell it in the liquor store. If you buy them, I still have my bottle here. I still have my Café Calva. It will warm you up and light you up for the day. And they used to call me Mr. Calvados. Here comes Mr. Calvados.
They used to call JP down in Bogota Mr. Aguardiente, because that stuff would fire you up too, wouldn't it, Murph? Look at his face.
That'll put you down on the ground.
So as a result, he is sitting there, and we sit down, and all of a sudden, the old guys are at the counter, and he throws a plastic bag on the table in front of everybody. And he says, here it is. It was a half a kilo of almost white heroin, but it had a little gray tint to it because they weren't using charcoal black to make it the white. And so I look, and I grabbed the package, and I'm looking around, and everybody's kind of looking, and I said, I'll be right back. And I went in the bathroom. I had an ampule, and I tested it, and bam! I said, son of a bitch, I got it. So now
Hey, and Pete, just dispel a myth for everybody, because a lot of people see, even in the movies, they kind of cut the package open. They'll take a Kojak used to take a taste of it, and stuff. It's like, number one, that gets you killed because you don't know what's in there, right? But nobody.
That's a no-no.
That's a no-no.
That'll make you pee hot.
Yeah, no. That's against. And if we ever had agents even try and all that, they're off the team, and they've been brought up on charges.
That's Hollywood crap.
All right. So this ampule blows up. It's like what? Pure.
It's a little glass ampule. You break it, and then you just take a little pinch of it, put it in there, and then if it's real heavy, high percentage in the 80, then it immediately turn purple, almost black, but it'll have a purple tint to it, and you've got the stuff. And so as a result, I immediately went to the office. This was on a weekend, on a Saturday, and I went to the office, and I called Nick, and I called the director, and I said, "You guys better come to the office." And I said, "Oh, by the way, Nick, bring me $5,000, will you?" I says, "Because I won the bet." And he goes, "What?" So they came to the office. We tested it there, and they went ballistic. This is holy crap. Long story short, I ended up going to Belgrade, and I was there behind the block country, undercover. With
and
a Canadian.
Belgrade, for folks, that's in Serbia.
So, yeah. And I had a phony Canadian passport under the name of Pierre Brissette. And I went there with the ex-custom guy. He was my brother, my Canadian brother. And I had already made arrangements at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal. I had a suite there. And that was my mail drop thing for people to send me messages and telegram, bad guys. So I had that arranged with the office there and the RCMP. So as a result, we were there. We negotiated for 15 kilos of heroin. And then I told them, I says, send me a message at the hotel that we're celebrating the 15th anniversary of our brothers. Please come, because this is, probably his last birthday, blah, blah, blah. And they did. We got the message. And so I told them, I said, look, I'm tied up here in Montreal, but my brother will take the delivery. That was so I could keep my identity going, and if they take everybody down, then I'm in Canada. So he did, and so it's all in the book, the entire case. And that was the first heroin seizure ever made in the block country, and we uncovered the first heroin lab. So people went crazy over it, and we broke up the operation. And the funny side to that one was I got back to Paris, and the boss says, we got a call from Interpol. And he says, the director of Interpol wants to see you in St. Cloud, which was Interpol now is down in Lyon. In Lyon, yeah.
And you have to say Interpol. You have to say Lyon. It's like you got to Lyon.
Yeah. So I go there, and the director, his name was Jean Lapote, big, fat, almost identical to. What's his name from the FBI? The
Jack
original.
Garcia.
Huh?
Jack Garcia.
Yeah. And so I walk into his office, and he goes, "Oh, Pierre, how are you?" And all that. So sit down, and he says, "I have a problem. I need. We have an international arrest warrant for 2 Canadian brothers, Pierre Brissette and Andre Brissette." And he says, from Yugoslavia. He said, they just uncovered a heroin lab, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, do you Americans have any information, possibly ever hear the name of Pierre Brissette and Andre Brissette?
Yeah, maybe.
And I said, Mr. Napoleon, no, not really. No,
I don't recall, Senator.
Yeah, I don't recall the famous phrase. So he looked at me and he said, well, how do I respond to this? because it's an international emergency arrest if located. I said, if I was you, I'd probably say unable to locate. Merci, Pierre. And he says, have a good day.
But he knew, didn't he?
Yeah, he knew. He knew it was me. So, but he said, and he laughed and he said, "Be careful, please."
Well, that's the thing is with your fake passport, right? Or I mean, your undercover passport. If you'd gone and used that somewhere, there's a chance if you had used it with that red notice out, right, you would have been picked up.
Oh yeah, I would have been picked up and all that. But immediately, and this is where liaison and cooperation. And I'm a fanatic for liaison. Agents. We have agents that are sitting back, and they're lucky if they make one case a month or every 6 months, because they sit in the office. They look good. First of all, they're with the wrong agency. They should be over at the FBI.
There you go.
There is our one mandatory FBI joke for the podcast.
Exactly.
We love you guys.
But I'm a fanatic, and Steve knows this. When I was the boss of the Group 10 where Steve was, and John Brown was the supervisor, and JB and I are best of friends, I used to tell guys, and when I teach, and I tell them, and I say, the biggest mistake agents make, and I've asked to speak at the our academy, but so far there's been no taker, because I teach undercover for various police departments and academies, and I told guys, I says, guys, yeah, I've made a lot of cases, but it was always a team effort. And the one thing that is so dangerous, and there's this continuous battle. I don't care if they say, "Oh, we get along, we get along." That's a bunch of BS. You have agents and who are so engrossed in wanting to make a case, but they don't want to tell any other agencies or get any agency involved. As a result, I say, you want to make cases? Or do you want to sit at your desk and look pretty? And I'm a federal agent. That's bullshit. I was a street agent. I grew up and I still feel like I'm a street agent. And, if I have a case, and Steve knows this, we immediately contacted Miami, Dade County Sheriff's Department, Miami Beach Police Department, and told them, hey, we got a case going. We want to bring you guys in on it. And they brought them in. And I used to tell guys, go and visit these departments. Don't just sit at your desk. And you'll be making cases. And everybody say, Jesus, he's making cases, because they will refer cases and you work jointly. Southern Comfort, biggest cocaine conspiracy in the history of the United States. How did it start? We had U.S. Marshal brought a guy that was in protection. And he said, I've been contacted by the old guy that I used to transport cocaine shipments for, Harold Rosenthal. He wants to hire me to bring a load in from Tennessee that's coming in from Colombia to bring it to Miami. And because of our liaison, we made the biggest case in history. 2 years, we were the transporter for the U.S. mob. $3.8 billion worth of cocaine we brought in for the mob.
Hey, now let's put a pin in that, because that is such a great story. But we want to bring you back on that, because that is a whole story deserving of going down the rabbit hole on that one. Because I was reading about Southern Comfort, I was reading about French Connection. Yeah, and no, because that gets into both your books. So this gives us an excuse to bring you back and talk about, because this case, we don't want to cut it short. This case deserves to hop into it, because I was reading, not only did I read about the case, I read the appeal that was made to the U.S. District Court and all of the stuff, and it's like, oh my God, there's a lot of shit going on here we can't cover in the next few minutes. But let's do this, Pete. You got 2 books, and we want to talk about kind of like what you're doing now. So because you guys can go to Pete Charette Books. That's PETECHRETTE books.com. I didn't spell out books. I figured some of the FBI
You
guys
didn't
would be able
spell
to.
Charette right either. It's Char.
That's what I said.
ETTE.
Charette, didn't I?
He's from Kansas. Sorry, Pete.
I'm reading your damn website. That's what it says on the website.
Yeah, the website. Yeah, that has a lot of pictures there and all that. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple good pictures. I'm surprised you put one of your old Vice pictures back in the day of in that black and white.
Oh, the girls.
The girls.
Let me just give you a heads up. There's not a lot to see there. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, that one you had to let her go for lack of evidence. But you got a book called One Hell of a Ride, which, by the way, was a finalist in the Independent Author Network for outstanding first nonfiction, and then One Hell of a Ride 2, which this is the one we'll get into next time with you about Operation Southern Comfort. But let's talk. Go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off, but now I just got another finalist award for number 2.
Ooh,
you can cut us off for that. Congrats. So, well, that tells you something too, because anytime you you're an independent, you're writing your book. Now, are you self-publishing or did you go through a publisher?
No, I have a publisher. Yeah.
Okay, but that's a hell of a lot. That is a great award.
It's on Amazon and all that, and also there's 4 trailers on YouTube under One Hell of a Ride. They're like 3-minute trailers with music and all that, and so
we're gonna put it all on there. But let's kind of close this out by talking about what are you doing now? So you've been teaching undercover. And obviously conversating with Mark Wahlberg. Tell him I said hello. Tell him, remember the dude who interrupted your phone call with your wife in Las Vegas at Wally's? That was me.
Well, what I'm doing now is I'm doing a lot of appearances. I've done numerous podcasts. They're on YouTube and all that. I've done, I think, probably 7 podcasts, and then I'm doing this with you guys today, which I'm honored, really am, and I appreciate that. Also, I do appearances, books signing, and then now also now some people have contacted me that they companies want me to come as a guest speaker at their annual meetings and all that. So I'm available to do that also. And I got, as a matter of fact, I'm very honored. And Steve, I mentioned it to you. I'm honored right now. The Mob Museum in Vegas, they have approached me, and they want to do 2 exhibits, one on Southern Comfort and one on the French Connection. And I'll be side by side with you guys. According to what Jeff told me.
Hey, sorry to drag you down there, Pete.
Yeah, spoiler alert, everybody. Pablo's dead. Don't go down there. Elvis is dead and Pablo is dead. 2 things you got to know when you go to Vegas.
Yeah, Pablo used to supply us the cocaine on Southern Comfort. I'll talk about that to you.
We're going to have to talk about that. But hey, well, first of all, and the other thing too, let me bring this to an end. I pulled up the write up, and there's 2 of them actually. So there's Special Agent Frank Tumillo, Into Watch, which was October 12th, 1972. During that time, another special agent, which was Special Agent Thomas Devine, was also shot during that.
Yeah, Devine was the supervisor. He
was paralyzed and died from his injuries on September 25th, 1982, Into Watch. So for Frank and Thomas, I mean, this episode is dedicated to 2 guys. And look, man, it's still to this day, we can see and we can hear. Look, I got friends' names on the wall. You do. I mean, to this day, it still gives you goosebumps and makes you think about that stuff.
It does. This is one of the most dangerous jobs you can ever do. And we get on here and we have fun talking to each other, and we bust chops and talk about the exciting things. But the one thing you can never forget is this will end your life. I was honored. I had forgotten about writing the introduction, a testimonial for your book, Pete. And I was just reading it, and everything, I can't believe everything I wrote in there is absolutely true to this day. You are a true American hero, a true American patriot. Just like I said in the testimonial, you'll never hear Pete say that about himself, but that's the mark of a true hero. They won't call themselves a hero. So
and let me quote you on that, Murph. In today's society, the word hero is thrown around freely with little regard to the actions or circumstances involved. But Pete earned that title, although he'll never use that title or admit it. But isn't that one of the traits of a true hero? He gives credit
Absolutely.
to everybody else and not himself.
Absolutely. So just, having you on here and having you as a longtime friend. I think we brought you down to Bogota after you helped me get the job down there. We won't talk about that because I'm not sure the statute of limitations has run out on everything, but we had a good trip, didn't we?
We had a hell of a ride, Steve.
Yes, we did, and thus the book. So highly
that will be the
encourage
subject
everybody.
of Pete's third book.
As a matter of fact, I'm exploring something now that there's going to be more books coming out, but it's going to be fictional, but it's going to be very, very exciting. Yeah.
No, it is. It's a true honor to have you on here, Pete. So thank you so much. And we definitely want to get you back to talk about Southern Comfort.
You're around here to talk about obviously too thankful for your service. This is me
absolutely
saluting you, saying thank you, Inspector Clouseau. You were the real Inspector Clouseau, crazy like a fox. Is he crazy or is he? So, but you did such great work. We appreciate this. And folks, one last time here, make sure you go to Pete Charette Books, and I'm going to spell it out for Murph so he doesn't think I'm missing it. That's PETECHARETTE books.com. Get One Hell of a Ride and One Hell of a Ride 2. We'll have those books posted on our website. So Pete, this is us saluting you, saying thank you. Thank you so much for your service. Don't you go anywhere. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief.
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. We won't tell you what we were talking about, but it's alternate pronunciations of poutine. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Pete, again, what I love too is he's got that outrageous kind of, you can tell a little bit of that French, but that's why it works so well for him over in Paris, because he was a French-Canadian mobster doing business over there. He understood the language. And look, I got to tell you too, I think one of the things you would not expect is you expect DEA agents to maybe look the same or talk, be English and stuff. But you got Javier, right? You got Abe Perez. You've got all of the different folks we've talked to, but then nobody was ever, that's why they took him, because he was the only fluent French speaker and they needed him right away. So he bypassed the traditional wait to work overseas and he got there pretty darn quick. PDQ.
Yeah, and you know what I love about Pete? I mean, all these years he's been retired for a while now, and you could tell as he's telling his story how excited he still gets over this. That's Morgan and I talk about this, but like we talked about the Nashville shooting, the two officers that took down the shooter at the Covenant School. As I'm watching those videos, my heart starts racing. I'm starting to sweat because you still get excited by the cases. And you can tell Pete was in the right job. He was born to be a police officer, law enforcement professional. He still has the excitement when he tells the stories, and that's why we're going to bring him back, because he's got some more great stories to tell us.
Yeah. Well, if you guys like that, if you like those stories, head on over to Apple and Spotify, hit those 5 stars. Let us know what you think. It's magic. It's Disney. It's David Copperfield, David Blaine, your favorite street magic. We don't know how it works. We just know it does. Head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for information about the show and to get the links to Pete Charette's books, Hell of a Ride and Hell of a Ride 2. Covers a lot of the stuff we're talking about. And that we'll be going into as well. So we'll be adding it. We'll be constantly updating that. Also follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. And also make sure you head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. I'm telling you, we got a lot of good stuff on there, and you got to go, if nothing else, listen to it just for the Narcometer review this month. And you get the Narcometer review at the Guardian of the Realm or Warden of the Throne level, where we talk about the French Connection movie with Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider, not Rob Schneider, Steve. Steve thought it was Rob Schneider, the comedian. No, he wasn't born then. Roy Scheider, no, different. And where we talk about that. So head on over there and do that. But hey, guys, most importantly, we thank you guys for your support. Yes. We really do. And we're doing some different things here. We've got a new advertisers we're working with. You're going to hear some of that, especially in this episode. So guys, we want to thank you once again, as always, for spending your time with us and for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and French-friendly game of all, Game of Crimes.